Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming to you on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, it's an honor to bring in a cat who's been on the bandstand for the last several decades in an effort to carve out a band with its own individual voice, its own individual sound, and cultivating a fan base rabid enough to create a domestic touring circuit that's viable in a very interesting time in our music history. This is all before the beginning of the pandemic, which has basically halted the live music experience in so many ways. And my guest is somebody who does not pity himself. He doesn't feel sorry for himself. He's not a victim. He doesn't have grievance. He recognizes that there's always two ways to look at things, the light and the dark. And I think he was naturally born with the inclination to look towards the light. Evidence of the fact that he recovered from a harrowing accident, and not only recovered, but really just seemed to take it on as a challenge, and then came back and has continued to create 30 years of Mother Hips with their leader, Tim Bluhm. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. That is quite a auspicious introduction. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you having me on. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, brother. You know, it's great to talk to you, man. I just wanted to ask you, Tim, like, I remember, I was born in 78, but you talk to people that were, guys from the section, like Lee Sklar, Danny Korchmar, and,
Sure.
They talk to me about how basically music used to dictate our culture. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, if you just look at the way the medium was digested by the public and kind of the social messaging within the music. And in any event, music used to have a serious, significant impact on our culture. And I wanted to ask you how much music has an impact on our culture today.
Well, I think that's a good observation. I think you're right. I think there's been other things that have superseded music to define our culture, as we all are aware of, like the tech sector and stuff like that. Just things that capture people's imaginations and that bring people power and money, things like that. Those are the elements that make culture-defining elements. And music. Music has less of that slice of that, a smaller slice of that pie than it used to, but it still is huge, and it still controls and activates our emotions as much as it ever did. And that might not be as much of a cultural touchstone these days, but I don't think there's anything that's changed about the way music hits our brains and our hearts as it always has,
Maybe the better question was like, how has it changed insofar as when you were at Chico State playing the frat houses and cultivating like an authentic fan base? It was pre-cell phone. There were computers, but they were very antiquated. Basically you guys were like, people, Loya Kano's sweat from his brow was hitting people in the front row. But the bottom line is that you truly created an authentic fan base. Can you talk about authenticity and how that's changed from when you started the Hips 30 years ago, and as opposed to bands that are starting out today, and how hard it is to cultivate a loyal fan base?
Yeah, I don't even understand what is going on these days.
Me neither, man.
It's like you see like Instagram and acts that are on Instagram, and a lot of those people will have this huge following, and they'll get huge engagement and reaction on Instagram. But you might, depending on who it is, you might know for a fact that they don't really have a live business. They can't go out and make money playing concerts. and yet they have like 1 million Spotify listens.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And I just don't even, I just don't know. I'm, that's beyond me. All I know is that, we can go out and do that to the degree that we can do that, not to a huge degree, but that's how we've always made our living, is just going out there and playing shows. And we still, obviously this last year we haven't, but we still do. That's still the only way we can make a living, really. So that seems to me it's pretty authentic. It seems pretty authentic. I don't know what more there is to it.
Well,
grab a guitar, set up your amp, get on stage.
Well, that's the point, is that they're the people that are being propped up as like, this is not even like on Instagram, but just in pop music, some people that are being propped up can't even perform live. So in some ways, the technology has, before, if Wexler or Tom Dowd or, people were going to release records on Vanguard, there was a certain threshold you had to meet in order for it to get released. So now you're dealing with people that are incredibly successful, quote unquote, in our Western paradigm, but they can't even play on stage. And so, that to me is for my daughters and for future generations, that's what is concerning to me coming out of the pandemic, because even for you, Tim, reading about your career, you've been a leader, you've been signed to record labels. Is it fair to say that for you, the only way that you can truly make a living and get ahead, so to speak, is by touring, road dogging, and the merch table? Can you talk?
Yeah.
Is that, even with your situation as a leader, that's still the only way you can really get ahead?
I would say that's the simplified version of it, for sure. But I've found other ways. I'm pretty motivated to find other ways. Producing records for other artists is a pretty viable path. I've been working on that for a couple decades now, and that's a fun way to do it. I love working with other artists and hanging out in the studio. And then through the pandemic, I had to adapt to that, and just doing the Facebook Live, weekly Facebook Live shows, and just getting basically what amounts to donations from people that are watching. That worked out okay for me too. So, there's been some adaptations to that, because a guy like me, I'm 50 years old now, and, I look at touring for another 25 years or 30 years. I just don't know if I got it in me.
Explain about, that is such a fascinating, that is such a beautiful thing but I also am curious as to not just the physical exhaustion and the fatigue, but really, it's funny because I think back to the late great Neil Casal, and nobody can really ever understand exactly why he did what he did. But I think part of it was also him looking at this paradigm and saying, do I want to play these upholstered sewers? So, do I want to do this for 30 more? Can I do it for 30 more years? Is that, that is,
I know.
And yet that is what, and that is what we, what is it's being faced with. But I just wanted you to talk, if you could, about, I interviewed John McLaughlin, and the way he started Mahavishnu, and the way the band started, and those they all basically either lived together or recorded and stayed in the same place until they could work out their breathing, odd meters, and there was just a lot of familial collaboration. And I wonder if you could talk about the closest that the Mother Hips, like the Dead all lived in the Haight-Ashbury, and then eventually they went on their own way. But what was the closest thing you guys had to a Big Pink early on?
We lived it as much as anyone ever did. We had a couple, probably 3 or 4 different band houses that we all lived in. There was one out on Valambrosia in Chico that was right across the street from Bidwell Park, and it had a big pool and it had an orchard back there. We had the pool house we turned into our practice room, and we all lived there and just and practiced there and had parties there. And we had the Chestnut Street was the other house that we lived in even longer, and it was just a normal neighborhood house, but we've practiced there all the time. We were permanently set up, and we pretty much had a party there every night, just played music. And Greg and I not only did we share a closet that had been turned into a tiny little bedroom off the kitchen, but we shared a bed. It was just a queen-size mattress, and we both slept in that bed for probably 4 years. And then
that is unbelievable. That is insane. I mean, can you?
We didn't care.
What? Looking back on it, I mean, because 30 years is a long time, and you've been sort of. It's interesting because you're definitely based in more the singer-songwriter sort of vein, I guess. Even though I hate labels, but what did you learn about pre-production versus post-production in your earliest albums? Because I think that in my mind today, all the great albums, all the great producers that I love in jazz or, even in rock, I mean, everything was about pre-production. How did you want certain things to sound? And then once you hit record, you hit it. And there wasn't this insane amount of perseveration about the back end. And today, it's all about post-production. And I really wanted to get your thoughts on that, because post-production can drain, because we have the technology, it can take all the soul out of the music and the song. And I wanted you to talk about early on, like how you developed, whether you agree with that, and how you developed your point of view as it related to pre- and post-production.
We didn't, I don't even think we really knew the term pre-production back in those days. Our pre-production was just playing the songs, the material, the new material, playing it at sound checks and on the road, because we were just always on the road. We didn't really have the wherewithal or the resources to figure out that you could go to like a rehearsal studio. We'd never even used a rehearsal studio until we were like 40, probably. But
so 20 years. So there was no rehearsal studio for the first 2 decades of the Hips.
I mean, we rehearsed in the drummer's bedroom. We rehearsed. We played our asses off. But so much of that is just that we were just on the road all the time. That was in those days. We were on a major label. We weren't really selling a lot of records, but we were putting out records, and the label just wanted to, break you on the road. That's what they said. And they would give us ample tour support money to have a van and a trailer and a crew of 2 or 3 guys to help us, and we'd played like 250 shows a year for probably 6 years. And so there was really no time to rehearse, but except at soundcheck. But we did it all the time, and that's how we would come up with tunes, and then we'd play them on stage to audiences and see what people's reactions were, and then that's kind of how we would figure out what we wanted to record. And then we would just pretty much record live. We would just go in and build like a little vocal booth on one end of the room, so I could go in there with a microphone and my guitar and sing, and then everyone could play at the same time.
Exactly. So that, and then in today as a producer, like you said, I mean, is it a case-by-case basis, or do you try to get the artist in the mindset of once the record button goes on, that's kind of the best, that's the hottest, that's the most live it's going to feel? I mean, can you talk about it's just, you know better than anybody probably that, I mean, that's not, it's people are obsessed with post-production now. And so.
Well, it's so cheap and it's so effective. It's really easy to do it. And, musicians are used to not getting paid really anyways. So you stick a powerful computer in front of a musician who has plenty of time to work, and they don't mind, they're not looking at it from an hourly point of view. They'll spend 100 hours editing music. Why not? And it's incredible what you can do. It really is. It's amazing. But for sure, one of the symptoms of that is, one of the results of that is not emphasizing the actual preparation for a recording session. And I don't think it's totally gone. I mean, I try to work with people that are able to get together in a room and play the song and for real, and not do a bunch of editing. Pretty much the most editing I do is just nothing more than you would have done on a tape, on a real tape, on a tape machine anyways.
Can you talk about a specific time and like how you cajoled certain people to play live together? That's the way it always was for so long in the studios, and there was some very minimal overdubbing. But I mean, can you talk about a specific time when when you really had to put your producer hat on and say, guys, it sounds flat unless you go and hit all together live?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly just get people prepared for that and just say, we want to do it live. I've made so many records, in my home studios in various times when I was learning how to record and things like that, where you'd start with an acoustic guitar and a click track, and that would be the basic track, and then you have to find someone to play drums, and then or I would play the drums, God forbid, and then and it's a certain sound, and it's kind of cool, but I got tired of doing that, so I started looking for bands that either could play well live together, like the Coffis Brothers, who I'm producing right now.
Yes.
And this is the second record I've done with them. They play a lot. They practice. They're prepared. They know what they can do. They can sing live. It's amazing. But then, sometimes if it's a singer-songwriter, I have drummers and bass players that I really like, that we love working together, and then I just know that those guys can get in a room with somebody and deliver the goods in real time.
Did you have what was the first time you met Jackie Green?
First time, I think we were both playing. He was like the new hot kid coming up.
Right? Yeah, he still is, right? I mean, he's still hot.
He still is, absolutely. But I kept hearing his name around Northern California, and I was like, who is this guy? And this was like, I think it was like my, because there's like that sort of competition kind of thing too, because I was a little older. I think Jackie's like 9 years younger than me, so it's kind of like, shit, who's this guy? Like this, I heard he can really play guitar, and so I kind of wanted to like see what he was all about. And I had also heard that he liked the Mother Hips, so I was I liked that. I sort of wanted to see what he was about. So I think I messaged him on like MySpace. That was
the thing. Yeah, absolutely.
And he responded right away, and we started kind of a little rapport. And I know what it was, is that we were both in New York City. That's what it was. We both happened to be back east at the same time, and we just met after we did. He came to my show. I was playing solo.
What was the venue?
Store
in the city?
It was called Jack's Coffee, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was this tiny little coffee shop that my label guy, John Salter from ATO, who's been a buddy for a long time, he got me a show there. That was like his favorite coffee shop, and the owner, Jack, was like a huge music fan. But it was literally like, I mean, nowadays it doesn't even sound weird, because now this is like what shows are.
That's exactly
today.
Right.
It was like 18 chairs, and the front row, it was so small. I was sitting like in the little ledge in the window with my back to the front window, and Jackie and his band showed up. This is the first time I ever met him, and they were kind of late, and there was no more chairs. The only chairs that were available were like first 3 chairs, and like literally Jackie, like his knees were like touching my knees, like face to face as I played the show.
Wow.
And that was just kind of obviously kind of funny. So we went and had pizza after the show and became fast friends.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about what it feels like to have? It's so interesting because uh, I mean, the Grateful Dead. The line is that they were closer. They were as closer than brothers. And I think that they all sort of
Yeah.
had their own individual paths, and and you were, I think, very articulate about how different Billy is from Mickey to Phil, but how important is it for you to get to like the people that are in your band, and not just going out with people that, or is it paramount to say, well, I'm not crazy, because I mean, some people, they're not crazy about it, but the person fills the role within a group, and
Yeah.
they bring something to the table. The one thing I noticed about you when I saw you live, it was a little bit of a different. It was an acoustic show, but you had this really sort of unconventional and almost unconscious way of leading the band, and it was really cool. There was a lot of nonverbal communication. It was kind of whimsical. It just wasn't. There was no formula trip. It was just very hip, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit about how important it is for you, whether it's about bringing people in that can fill the void musically, or is it really about chemistry and simpatico off the bandstand as well?
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's really about just hanging around friends, people that I really like, and I think maybe that's just because of the way I started with music, with rock and roll music at least. It was the same guys, it was very much a family and brothers, from other hips. We lived together, we socialized together, we hung out with the same people. And so I was just accustomed to being around people that I knew very well when I was playing music. I never really spent very much time playing music with people I didn't know. Like before the Hips, when I was in high school, the first band I was in as a singer was with like some of my brother's close friends, so it was always people that I knew, always connections. There wasn't a whole lot of like cold calling of just like, oh, I'm going to show up and be in a band with people that I've never met before.
No, exactly. No, I mean, like, what about your mentality? Is like, you strike me as somebody who just can play with anybody. You're comfortable. You don't need. It's not a. You may not be you're not going to set the world on fire. Instrumentally,
Yeah.
but you don't really care about
Yeah.
that. Like, that's like a George Harrison sort of playbook. It's like. He just loved to play. He always had his guitar in his hand. He always wanted to sing, and he really didn't care for any kind of wankish. I mean, what about the idea of playing with people that are better than you? Like, just to sort of up the ante. Like whether it's.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think it elevates. It makes me try harder to play. But I do. With all due respect to virtuosic musicians,
Yes.
which I have tons of respect for, that isn't really what I'm going for. I'm more interested in the kind of the overall picture. I don't think it's really about. In my music, at least, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of room for showing off and for saying like, look at what I can do. And it's an incredible skill, and it's a skill that is very effective on stage. People love it. People, someone will take a solo and the crowd will like applaud.
Yeah, because we've been trained to do that, whether you like it or not. I mean, to me, like it's not. I mean, I just wonder. Like, can you talk about specific songs that the Hips do that? Because there's you guys have a tendency to weave things in and out and work on different rhythms. It's not like you're going to stretch out and play, some 18-minute jam per se, but the songs are longer. I mean, how did you determine and which songs lent themselves to odd rhythm feels? You're a drummer, so I mean, that whether, contrary to popular belief, the drummer does drive the band. And
oh yeah.
And I just wonder about, because I think it's really fascinating, the idea that over time you recognize, oh yeah, that song lends itself to some exploration. But your exploration as the Hips is very different than the jam band scene that, you were that you've been put
Yeah,
into, you know?
it is. I mean, first of all, I'd like to just clarify that I'm definitely not a drummer.
You've played drum.
like
I mean, it's one
I
of the.
enjoy I own a drum set and I enjoy playing them. But when the rubber meets the road, I should
Hey,
be
come
nowhere
on,
near
man.
the drum set.
I think everybody knows that, you know?
Yeah, I think everybody does know that. Yeah. But it was reactionary to some degree, and it's kind of funny to talk about now because my perspective on this topic that I'm about to talk about is so much different than it used to be, and I certainly have lots of respect for the subject that I'm talking about. But we were in the early days, we were compared to the Grateful Dead a lot, and we were not. We just didn't, as a band and as individuals, we weren't familiar with the Grateful Dead. And it was not a favorable comparison to us in our minds. And so, and it was just odd because everyone said, oh, you must have listened to so much Grateful Dead. And we never had. So it was just sort of frustrating. I was like, no, we haven't. We don't even really know who they are.
Wow.
And it just, it gets tiresome after a while.
No, I don't. And let me ask you, what was your, this is so interesting, because it was more of the vibe, right? I mean, was that?
Yes, we didn't know what it was.
You didn't know.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't,
idea.
Yeah, it's insane.
It turns out that what it was, and now since then, we obviously listened to tons of Grateful Dead music and got to know some of those guys and had the honor of playing with some of them, and incredible life experience.
Insane.
Incredible experience. But at the time, it was just we had a perception of who they were, and we certainly knew like Deadheads. We knew kind of what they looked like, and that was pretty much the most we knew about
exactly.
Dead. And we were like shit, yeah, like we have long hair and like we wear like bell bottoms, but like we're like, this is just us talking. This is not necessarily what was true, but we thought we were like Led Zeppelin. We didn't think we were like the Grateful Dead. So we were like, that was not favorable. We were like, no, come on, stop saying that. We're like way gnarlier than the Grateful Dead. And so the result of that was that we would really try not to do anything like that. We were trying to stretch out and stuff like that, but not. I don't know. We just wanted it to be different. It wasn't like feel good. It was like a little more like.
I didn't know. You know who had a similar experience? Maybe you've talked to him about it. Is Steve Kimmock. When he first moved to San Francisco from Pennsylvania, he was Zeppelin, Metallica. I mean, very much a metal rock guy, and he was out there, and people were like, yo, man, you sound like Jerry Garcia. He's like, Jerry who? I don't even know who that is. And then, I mean, it was literally the way you're talking was the same way. And then I just wonder if it was just maybe the idea that, you guys were hipped out and playing original tune. That was sort of the idea is that,
Yeah.
I mean, I use skiffle in the nicest possible way. It's just you guys weren't like from the academy, and you're playing original songs, and you have a good vibe to you. When did that really change in your mind? Like, was it when you connected with Phil that you began?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. It was. I remember when it was. Jackie and I had a recording studio together for years, and we were hanging around on the deck behind the studio, and he gets a phone call, and it's Phil Lesh on the phone. Like his Jackie's manager gave Phil Jackie's number,
right.
and I knew who it was. I was like, holy shit, Jackie! And he's like, Phil wants me to like go out on tour. And I was like, holy shit, that's fucking incredible. So then Jackie started listening to a lot of Grateful Dead music because he needed to learn all these songs. So that was my first real introduction to the songs and stuff, because I was around. Jackie and I were hanging around all the time. So I started listening to tons of Dead music with Jackie, and he was playing the songs all the time. And then Phil would like come hang, he'd come down to the studio and we'd go out to dinner and whatever. So got to sort of hang out a little bit. And that was when I really heard the music and was like, fuck, this it was the Grateful Dead. I mean, it's everything that, I don't need to say how incredible it is. It just blew my mind. All these amazing, complicated, beautiful.
Yeah, essentially folk songs. I mean, really amazing. I mean, Phil is like, I mean, the guy is he? I know like people like Adam McDougall had their mind blown by him the first time that they played, not just because of his unpredictability, but also just like his philosophy as it relates to short rooms versus long rooms and how to play short notes tonight and this, that. And,
yeah,
what is it? Just, I mean, nobody's getting any younger here, but I mean, Phil is basically a beatnik. He was playing like avant-garde trumpet on Perry Lane, I mean, he was a really like, everybody kind of, I mean, I just watch interviews with Garcia and he just is like praises Phil for being the smartest fucking dude in the world. I mean, the man what is his contribution to American music, Phil Lesh?
He's just so unique in his approach to the musical part of the bass, as well as just the technical part of it and the equipment, and just he's just so free in his mind. Like, I don't think people understand that now. Like, he's a real product of like the '60s, where it was really it was real. It was
so real, dude.
It was so real. It was
so
and now
freaking real, man.
Kind of like, it's easy to just think of it as like costumes and just like finding the old clothes in your dad's closet, like I did. And I didn't really know what the '60s really was. And I was born in '70, so I wasn't really that far away from it. But still, I certainly didn't experience it. But when you meet those guys and you hang out with them, Phil and Mickey and Billy, those are the guys I've hung out with the most. They're just like from a different. They're like outlaws in a weird way. They just think differently than people. They make a lot of other people seem really uptight in the way that they think, and
I love it, dude. It's. I mean, but did it have an effect on you? I mean, you were never a square cat. I mean, or did you feel like they even loosened you up?
Yeah, they did. They opened my mind to some stuff for sure. I mean, I was, my upbringing was. I mean, probably wasn't that different than some of those guys. Just suburban kids growing up. But yeah, they're just, it's just a generational thing. They just came, they were the zeitgeist for like one of the most popular cultural movements, one of the most impactful cultural movements that the United States has ever seen. And they're still around. They're like around, and they're coherent, and it's just amazing that those guys are around. They're so generous with their, they like to play with younger guys, and they're just.
Yeah, they're horny to play. I mean, I cannot imagine. They're like crazy. Phil also, I mean, opening Terrapin Crossroads, I forget who told me, they were like, he's not a restaurant owner. And yet he freaking opened this place and brought in all these beautiful people who really were not that well versed in any of the Dead vernacular, which was genius. Gave him a place to play. It's fucking genius. Like, he paid, there was money. That's the point, Bluhm. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want to put this in for you right now, and we'll come back and break it down. All right?
Okay. Let's do it.
I had one. I was making noises with pliers and my Echoplex one night, and a girl was in the front row who I'd known in the past. I hadn't seen in a while, and the music that had pretty much stopped, and I was making very semi-violent sounds on the guitar, and it was very, we were in it, and the guys were backing me, and it was happening, and it was quiet enough, and she looks at me and she says, "Greg, are you okay? Is everything all right with you?" Like, she was, she had a really emotional reaction. After the show, she tried to be like, "Are you, is something wrong with you in your life?" I'm like, no. I mean, the only thing that's wrong is I'm kind of getting the inquisition from you right now.
Right.
I don't really, I want to go outside and get some fresh air, you know?
Right.
But, in that moment, I was like, yes, something happened there where it was effective enough to, I'm not interested in showing people the few chops that I have. I like it. So if I can take someone on some sort of journey away from or in the spot, it doesn't have to be away from it. If I can take them somewhere in a section of music, whether it be a planned vocal section or an improvisational section, I feel like that's, I hope that happens. And I would say the other thing, that if someone walked into a room and had some familiarity with who I am as a guitar player and didn't know who was playing and heard me play, say, "Oh, Greg's here," so that my musical voice it shows up as a unique quality. That.
Well, I mean, he gave it away. That is the legendary, Greg Loiacano. I mean, so Tim, can you just talk about, because I think this is the important thing about, like, for me as a broadcaster, it's like, how do I cut through the morass of the millions of other people that are broadcasting and be unique and singular? Yep. I don't care about the money I don't care about that stuff. I want to inspire. And so I really wanted you to talk a little bit about how over time, as a singer, how you've cultivated your ability to get inside the song and tell the story, if that is in fact your true nature on the bandstand.
It is. It's always the mystery. It definitely doesn't seem like I've figured anything out. I'm always constantly, hearing other singers and being transported by their voices, and then just quickly after that, hearing it, going like, "Fuck! How did they do that? I want to be able to do that." It never seems like that. There's never like an answer or a formula for me where it's like, "Oh yeah, I know how to do that. I can do that." It's not a formula that I've been able to put in a bottle.
Yeah, we don't want a formula. I mean, isn't that the magic of it though? Like that's the whole issue.
I guess. Well, yeah, definitely that's what we want. But I think that there's a lot of musicians that can do that. That it's like on tap for them, and that's why we pay them to. That's why we want to be in the same room with them, because they have access to that. And I've been granted access to it at times, for sure. I'm not saying that I haven't, but it's not like I still haven't figured out how to just summon it when I want to. I mean, I have my ideas of how to try. I have my ways of going towards it as much as I can.
That's interesting. I mean, you remember like why you and Loiacano clicked right away? Who was the actual? I mean, you started when did the hips actually get birthed?
We were. It was very much just a collaboration. Like I think literally I was kind of like shy guy. I didn't really know anyone at Chico. I was like probably just turned 19, and I was definitely interested in music, but I didn't really play guitar. I could sing pretty well, and I had a harmonica. And Greg and I just like saw each other. Like I think I was walking past like a dorm room, and he was in there playing with some of the guys that would be part of the hips later, and I just stopped in and like I probably like stood outside of the door and like played a little harmonica just so they could like maybe hear it. Just sort of like timid, and someone poked their head out and was like, "Wait, what are you doing?" Like played a little blues or whatever, like Taj Mahal or something, and then we just sort of said, "Oh, that was cool. Maybe we should play some more." And I probably sang a little bit, and they're like, "Cool, we need a singer." And then Greg and I just started hanging out and playing guitar and smoking weed and just listening to. Greg wasn't really a singer, and I was just learning how to play guitar, so we kind of helped each other out in that regard. And then I was writing songs already because I was like I was into poetry and writing, and that's what I was studying at Chico State. And so writing songs seemed a little more interesting than writing poetry but I didn't really know how to do that. So I was experimenting with that. And then Greg and I just sort of started singing harmonies, and then we had some songs, and we needed a band. We wanted to rock out a little more. So it just kind of went from there.
How have you learned to, really, like, ultimately, I think what you talk about summoning up that sort of life force to be able to sort of not only raise your consciousness but raise the consciousness of the room and the band. But I mean, how have you learned to actually really get in and tell a story in the song? I mean, you can write lyrics, to a song, but then the delivery component of it is key because, well, you know better than anybody. How did you learn to not just, because I mean, I just see so many cats, before the pandemic. I mean, they go up and do these 3 or 4 minute, kind of canned tunes. They might be good, but guitar player's got 8 bars to solo. That's it. They're done. Even if they're on a burning solo, it's like, let them go. Just let them go. Let them go off, But, there's a fine line between, getting inside a song and really grooving and just sort of playing it as if you play it the same way every night. How have you learned to make it your own and stay inspired without it becoming a formula trip?
Yeah, that is a challenge. That's a good observation, because that's, especially when you're playing a bunch of shows all the time, it's super hard not to just fall into the formula. And it happens to everyone. I'm certain of it. But what we did as a band, and what we do as a band, is that we just try not to do that. Just try to explore some other melodies and try to maybe even explore some different song structures, and just be flexible and communicate with each other. So if Greg's feeling something and I can tell he's feeling good playing instrumental section, I'll give him a little look and just say, go again, keep going. And that can be as simple as just, if the band sees me moving closer to the microphone, I don't even have to look at anyone or even say anything, but you just get used to those cues. And it's just, if the singer's starting to edge toward the microphone, that he's ready to sing. And if he's not moving toward the microphone, then just keep playing, because he's not going to be there when the next form starts. And then sort of on a larger scale, I'd say that I just finding the way to sing and to play, finding your voice, which is nothing new to hear, but just being able to sing in a way that people believe you, and that it sounds authentic. That when you sing a line, people are like, "Oh, wow, okay, I heard that." It's just like someone writing a book or something, when the character is speaking, and you have to believe them. You have to have no sense of like, is that really what he'd say?
Mm-hmm.
Or
I dig.
That has to be completely. That there has to be no sense of that at all. It has to be. You got to be in it with the singer. You got to be right there with them, and you have to believe everything they're saying.
You think that you can learn that only on the bandstand? Can that be learned in the academy at all? I mean, did you learn that only through the live experience?
Yeah, well, I've never just really studied music, so I wouldn't really know. But I think you can. I don't really know. I think that.
I do. No, I mean, but I mean, what you're saying is that when you want to be believable, and that's not easy to do on a night and so you have to get out of. How have you learned to get out of your own way? That's kind of the issue. Is like, when you be like Tim Bluhm can be a conduit for information coming through you from the heavens. When your ego's out of the way, is that when you're able to sort of pull that off? Or
I just Well, what's my other option? What else were you going to say?
I have one more voice to play for you, and we'll come back.
Okay.
We were recording at Record Plant in Los Angeles, Poco was, and I was in the front of the building where they let people in, and there were a couple of guys in the studio. There were 3 studios there, and we were in one, and the other one had Dino Danelli and Gene Cornish, who were from the Young Rascals.
Absolutely.
And we'd done a lot of shows with them. And so when their band broke up, Clive Davis, as he was wont to do, he gave them a project to produce. And it was this heavy metal guy, the guy that wrote the hits like 18 or, for Alice Cooper. And, he was the guy that never wore a shirt and had his hair down to his waist and that kind of thing. The classic image. And the album they were doing on him was a heavy metal album. And it was classic. It had basically 3 chords, 10 songs with 3 chords in them, pretty much the same 3 chords. And it was not my cup of tea, and I guess nobody else's because it never sold anything. But they're doing this heavy metal record, and I watched them struggle, and they had this one track that they couldn't get the drums they wanted on it, and they hired like every drummer from New York to L.A. that was famous and had him come by the studio and overdub on this record. And I would go back there and sit, because they were my friends. I'd go back there and sit and watch them do it and struggle through this. So one day I'm up front, like I said, hitting on the receptionist, and this big black limo pulls up, and the door opens up, and these 2 gorgeous blonde girls get out in their black dresses. One of them is holding a stick bag, and right behind them is Keith Moon, and Keith is in a tuxedo with the the bow tie and the whole 9 yards.
Oh man! Oh boy!
And I thought, I said, I got to see this. So I follow him down the hall into the studio, and they put up that track that they've been working on. And I looked out into the studio, and Keith's drums were set up on a riser, as if he was playing for an audience. Not in the typical drum station, but on a riser. So things got off to a really bizarre start right from the beginning. And so they said to him, "Well, do you want to hear the track and before you go out there?" And he said, "No, it doesn't matter. I'll go out." So he goes out in the studio and he puts on his headphones, and he tapes them with gaffer's tape to his head so they won't fall off. Or maybe they were keeping his head on. I'm not sure. So they put the track on, and like I said, it was real predictable. Just 3 chords, just your typical heavy metal song of the day. And Keith starts playing, and he's playing. Now, there are rules in drumming. To this day, there are rules in drumming. Like most instruments have rules. On drums, what you do, you play a fill, and then you go, that's the intro, and then you go into the verse. And
right.
The verse is snare and hi-hat. Then it comes to the chorus, and you do a big fill, and you go to the big cymbal. This is just how drumming works. Those are the rules. Fill, verse thing, fill, chorus thing. So they're playing the track, and Keith is not playing to any of those rules. And Keith had his share of drugs, which I think relates to our conversation. But he's not following the rules. In the verse, he would play along. And he's playing fills all over where the guy's singing, and he's playing on the big cymbal, and then it would come to the chorus, and he'd go, and he'd go down right to hi-hat. And exactly the opposite of what the rules are for drums. And, as he was going, you knew what he was doing. He was listening to what was going on musically and lyrically and playing what he felt fit that. And so I'm standing in the back, and I thought, geez, this is really making this terrible song interesting. This is really genius. And Gene and the drummer, Gino, look over at each other, and they say, that is the worst piece of crap I've never heard worse drumming in my life. What is doing? And, eventually he did a couple of tracks, and at one point he broke a stick, and they stopped the tape, and he freaked out. He said, don't ever stop the tape when I'm playing, because I've got a lot of sticks out here. I'll just grab another one. Just totally not what you do in the studio. So anyway, they call him back in. He comes into the studio, and they, mates, that was really great. And, they played it back for him, and they said, really cool. And he leaves. And the 2 of them go, man, there is no way we could ever use that. It was just horrible. And it struck me for the first time ever And for the only time ever, I saw the connection between music and art. Because if you took a Picasso to somebody who had no idea who Picasso was and said, that's a drawing of a woman, they'd say, well, that's terrible. That doesn't look anything like a woman. It's all distorted, and that's not a woman. And they'd be right. And the same thing with Keith's music. You could listen to it, and you can say, that is genius. That is so interesting and creative. Or you could say that was bullshit, crap, and you'd be right, too. So for the first time, to me, I understood how art and music can connect.
Tim Bluhm, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Jim Messina.
That was my interview with Rusty Young. Rest in peace.
Oh,
and
wow! Rest in peace, Rusty.
Rusty Young, and there's two questions. I mean, the one question I have for you, Tim, is when you really, maybe it's from the beginning, but when you recognize that to throw the book away. Like, was there a definitive? I'm not that you probably for the betterment. You didn't go to the Guitar Institute or Berkeley or North Texas or things like that. But at a certain point, was there a definitive moment when you were like, I'm gonna play by my own rules, or you got to know the rules before you break them?
Yeah, I think it was kind of more what you just said. Like, I didn't really know the rules. I especially when I everyone can listen to rock and roll music, obviously, and I did my share of that when I was young. But when you pick up an instrument and you start playing guitar, which I didn't do until I was in my late teens, I just didn't really know. When I heard Neil Young, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. That's what really made me like pick up the guitar and be like, okay, I gotta figure this out, like, for good, finally. And talk about a record of sort of oddball guitar songs, and not playing by the rules. And that's really that was my starting point. And I was listening to Captain Beefheart and stuff like that from my older brother, and so I certainly never set out to play guitar in like the conventional way, just because I knew I wouldn't be able to, pretty much, more than anything. Not because I wanted to be strange or weird. I just knew I was going to have to do it a different way if I was going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, you're what they call a street scholar. You're my kind of cat. I just wonder about, like, has this time for you coming out of it, if we ever get beyond it and get back to some kind of, some kind of scene, domestic touring circuit, has the harder part been mental or physical? And then what is there anything that you took for granted before the pandemic that you will never take for granted again?
I think one of the most powerful things that I experienced during the pandemic was how much music means to people. I'm not talking about myself so much. I mean, I never quite took that for granted. That's a internal thing for me. But I think it's possible for me to become a little bit desensitized to the effect that playing music can have on your fans and on people that are listening to your music, because it just becomes it's just like your job. You just go out there and you do it.
Right.
And it's easy to forget that people aren't just buying tickets and showing up just because they want to hang out with their friends. They're going because it can be a transformative experience to go hear music being performed. And people needed that even more, I think, during the pandemic. I think there was a lot of despair. No one knew what the fuck was happening or what was going on or what was going to happen. And music was comforting. And I was able to interact with a lot of people doing those live streams every week. And it was almost more intimate than playing a live concert.
That
which
is so
seems
fascinating. That if you of all people to
weird.
say that is so cool in some ways. That because it's healing, man. I mean, I've walked into shows and felt very much dis-ease and walked out feeling healed for days, you know. But
I know, and that's just
yeah.
crazy.
But it's interesting how you work so much. You got to jump on the red eye. You got to do this, and then it kind of it does become a job, right? So you become desensitized to how impactful the music is on regular peeps.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it probably happens to all musicians that play a bunch. But I think I can speak for myself that a lot of times that when I go to play concerts and things like that, I'm not playing in these huge places where it's obvious that there's like, sometimes it's pretty modest, it's pretty humbling and humble, and so it's sort of hard to understand that those places that I go and play, it might not be a packed room somewhere on the East Coast or whatever. It might not be the most prestigious venue.
Yeah, well, I know what you're saying, but everybody's
Yeah.
watching even when they're not watching. That's the point.
Yeah, but you forget that.
I know exactly. I
Kinda-
totally.
Kind of get, and so during this, I was reminded of that. I was reminded of why it's powerful and why people need it so much, and I needed it so much too. The world was just broken down. It was simplified. It was like, I live alone. I live by myself, and when everything shut down, it was just me and my cat, and a lot of time to read the news and not do much else. And it was just like very elemental. And then I didn't really think about playing music at all at first. And then as it wore on for a few weeks and a few months, I started doing the live streams, and then they took a lot of my time. They took a lot of preparation, especially at first. They just consumed my week, and I would spend days preparing for them and getting messages on the internet about what I should play, and then I would rehearse those songs, and it really took over my life, and it was very cool. It was very, very simple.
I know you got to bounce. I just would love. It would be great to do a set 2 with you, man. I got a lot more that I'd love to talk to you about.
I would love to. I'd love to, Jake. I like talking with you. So
yeah, man, it's cool. I look forward to. Man, I never thought that being a music journalist that would actually be it's a wedge issue is like live music is like. It's so interesting because I know like you're playing the Henry Miller. With the hips, and like right now it's so hard because I want to go see live music, but yet it's still too early. It's like too restrictive because I need to liberate and I need to heal, and I can't just sit there.
Yeah.
Like we have been trained in this Eurocentric society to sit there and clap even if we don't even like what we heard. So it's like I need to. Anyway, man, you're a conduit, man. It's just like you just stay on the righteous path. But yeah, let's do set 2 because we got a lot more to get to, man. Yeah, man. And much love to you, man. Keep it up, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much, Jake. Take care of yourself.
All right, brother. You too, man. Later.
Keep doing the good work. Bye.
Thank you. Peace. Great to talk to Tim Bluhm. Thank you to Royal Potato Family. 30 years of Mother Hips. In the books, longevity and legacy is the key in any art. At the end of the day, you really can't take anything with you when you cross over. All that you can leave behind, that's what matters. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.